Over to you, Kelly.
Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Kelly Wayman and I am excited to be here with you today. This is a premium Michaels class, but we're calling it a premium preview because for this specific class you do not have to pay to get this access to this premium class. But I'm going to treat it like it's a premium class, so you will get all the information and knowledge that I can fit in an hour and a quarter, and feel free to ask questions in the chat. I've got McKenna that will feed me the questions, and I really just want you guys to have a great experience out of this. This is I'm making a fall wreath, and it's all basically paper. So hopefully you've already got the free design of the leaves, but I will show you how to do that in a second. So I have got actually 2 different wreaths that I created, and they are basically done exactly the same way. And so there's this Halloween wreath that's got leaves and then little sparkly bat embellishments. And then there is the fall wreath. And it is the same thing. It's wreaths, and then it's just got these little berry spray embellishments. And so they're basically done the same way. I put both out there on social media, and I got the most positive response on this fall wreath. And so that's the one I'm going to do in class. But if you have questions specific to the Halloween wreath, then I will also be talking about what you would do differently to make that Halloween wreath. And if you feel like I'm not covering that, just ask in the chat, and I'll make sure to address that. So let's go over the supplies that you'll need for the fall wreath. So this is all applied against an embroidery hoop. So this is from Michaels. This is a 12-inch embroidery hoop. You can get these in different sizes. I like the 12-inch for this size of leaf. You could go with a bigger embroidery hoop, and you could make your leaves bigger or just put more leaves on there. If you go with a smaller hoop, maybe a 9 or 10-inch hoop, you will either fit less leaves on there. If you're using the same size, they'll look a little bit different than this finished wreath. But you could even shrink your leaves down if you're using a smaller hoop. But this one is a 12-inch hoop. All right, so paper-wise, for the fall wreath, I've got this green and kind of a gold and kind of a tan pattern paper. So this is Green Traveler and Goldenrod and Real Sand. So these are Recollections pattern paper, specifically from Michaels, and they are quite thin. And I wanted to show you today how to work with thin paper. It's actually really nice to work with if you get your cut settings right, and so we'll talk about that. Also mixed in there with the pattern papers are cardstock leaves. And so with the fall, so basically this is the Spice Market Recollections pack, the 65-pound pack, and it's called Spice Market. This has a red and a kind of an orangey yellow and a green. Those 3 are the ones I'm using in the fall wreath. This one orange is actually the one I used for the Halloween wreath. So you could get the same paper pack and do either wreath. And then if you do the Halloween wreath, you would also just get some black, just plain black cardstock. Also the Recollections 65-pound. Okay, if you're doing, so the fall leaf is going to be those 3 colors of pattern paper and these 3 colors of cardstock. If you're doing the Halloween wreath, I told you used orange and black cardstock, and then also there's a black polka dot, an orange polka dot, and a black stripe. So those are the 3 pattern papers. Also the Michael's Recollection pattern paper that you would use if you're doing the Halloween wreath. And then for the fall wreath, I just use 1 berry spray, and we'll just trim that up and stick it in there. And if you're doing the Halloween wreath, you can use whatever embellishments you want. You know, if you want to use pine cones or I don't know, just walk through the aisles at Michael's and either the floral aisle or the holiday aisle, and you'll see things that would look fun to you. So the berry spray for the fall leaf. If you're doing the Halloween, then it's just this bat, kind of a glittery bat is what I use. But there were tons of fun things, and they're probably all on clearance right now since Halloween is almost here. Okay, and then tools you'll need. I'm using the Silhouette Cameo 4, but none of this is so big that you can't use a portrait. So I'll be showing it with the Cameo 4, but you can use a portrait, any model, a Cameo, any model. It's just paper that we're cutting, and all Silhouette machines cut paper. I'm also using, if you noticed, I'm using a cutting mat, Silhouette cutting mat, but I'm going to show you how to use a brand new sticky mat, my tips and tricks for that, and then a brand new sharp blade. If you are cutting this thin pattern paper, you're going to want a sharp blade. Then as far as tools, I'm using a hot glue gun, and I think that's it. Also, sorry, a scraper tool and a spatula tool. The spatula tool is kind of optional. That's what I'm going to use to pry the paper off the cutting mat. But the scraper tool, you could use, maybe a credit card would be stiff enough for what we're doing, but I really like this Silhouette scraper tool for shaping the leaves. So that's what I'm using the scraper tool for. And so we really do need a tool, some type of scraper tool or squeegee, whatever you've got that's kind of stiff and thin. Okay, so I think that is all of the tools. I may not have mentioned we need a hot glue gun. We'll use a hot glue gun. So let's go ahead and jump into the software. Okay, so I'm going to do a screen share. Okay, let me move a couple of my Zoom things around and we will get going. Do we have any questions before we start with this? Okay, all right, so if you have not already purchased for free, the free design, these are just leaves, and really you could use other leaf designs. I have tons of leaf designs in my Silhouette library just because I collect them and like to use them in things like this. But if you just go to the design store, and you saw that I did that just by clicking the store tab from Silhouette Studio, or it's silhouettedesignstore.com. Just click on this free tab, and it should be right here, these leaves. And if you haven't already, just add it to your cart and click to check out. I've already got it, so I am going to go back to Silhouette Studio. Once you download it, it's going to show up in your recent downloads folder. And so you can either type in something like leaf in your search bar. The design ID number is 382794. So if you know the exact design ID number, you can find it that way. I've given it a little star to make it a favorite, so I could also find it in my favorites folder, but however you want to find it, this is the one we're doing. It's called Leaf Wreath, and so just double click to open. Okay, so now with this design, I know what size I want these leaves because I've already done the wreath, but I'll just tell you that each one of these should be about 3.5 to 4 inches in height. And so I'm going to ungroup this. Up here at the quick access toolbar, there's ungroup. And so now these, you can see they've each got their own little individual box. And so I can resize each of them individually. The other thing I want to do is turn on my grid. So I've got kind of grid lines on my virtual mat. So I'm just going to type the letter G, and that will turn on grid lines. So if I just select one of these leaves and then click a corner handle, it'll drag, I can drag it and make it the right width. So let's see, I'm kind of watching on the side, 3.5 to 4 inches in height. That's probably good. Same thing with this other maple leaf. I'll select it and just kind of drag and resize. So I think I'm actually going more like 4 inches wide. I'll just go somewhere in there. And then one of these oak leaves. So these are kind of at a diagonal. So I'm going to rotate it with this little green rotate button so I can see better. I'm going to ignore these little side numbers here because I want to make it about 4 inches high. So I've got my grid here. I can count 1, 2, 3, 4 inches high. And so that's about right for this. I'm going to rotate this one. Do the same thing. I'm going to kind of put it so it looks vertical, and I'll stick it where I can see on my grid, and then just drag a corner handle to shrink it down to about 4 inches high. Okay, so now I've got these resized. That one looks a little small. I'm going to peek over at another document I created with the actual leaves I did on my project. And this is showing this oak leaf is 3.5 inches high exactly. And this, or sorry, maple leaf. And then this maple leaf is 3.5 inches high. So I'm going to do that to this original document. If I want to change some dimension exactly, then I just make sure up here in the quick access toolbar that the lock is showing. Instead of unlocked, I want it to stay locked. And I'm going to type in this 3.5 inches in the height, and that'll resize it for me. And I'll do the same thing, select this maple leaf. That's locked, so I can just type in 3.5 inches high. And we'll just leave these oak leaves about where they are. And maybe a little smaller. So as you can see, this is a kind of a creative process. There's not a right way to do it, a wrong way to do it. So just kind of close enough is good. So don't stress out about having exactly my same sizes. All right, so what I'm going to do with my cuts is, since I'm going to use a brand new mat, I want to cut my heavier paper first. So typically you're not going to want to cut really delicate or thin paper on a brand new mat. So I will usually cut a lot of cardstock, maybe I don't know, 5 or 10 pieces of cardstock on my sticky mat first, because that's way easier to release. But today we're going to start with the cardstock, but we will also cut the thin pattern paper on the sticky mat, and I'll show you how to do that. So I'm going to move these off to the side. Just kind of get them off. If they're not on my virtual mat, they are not going to cut. So I can just use this gray area over here as a holding area. And since I am using my cardstock first, it's letter size, so I want to make sure that my page is set up to letter size. So I'm going to open my page setup panel. Yours will usually open up automatically when you open a new document. So I want to make sure that my machine is correct. I've got Cameo, so that's right. My cutting mat, I am using the 12 by 12 Cameo mat. And then my media size, I want to choose letter. And then whether it's vertical or horizontal, you can switch that if you want. I'm just going to go with vertical. And I want to make a copy of the orange maple leaf and the red oak leaf. So to make an easy copy, I want to leave these originals over here. To make a copy, I'm going to hold my Alt key and click and drag a copy over. This is one of my favorite ways to make an exact copy. Another thing you can do is hold your Control key or Command if you're on a Mac and just use your arrow button and it will make a copy. So either way is a quick way to do that. Alt and drag. I think even on a Mac it's Alt. It may be Option if you don't have an Alt key. Okay, so I want 3 maple leaves of these orange maple leaves, and I want 5 oak leaves of the red. So hold Alt, click and drag, and then I can just use Control, hold my Control key while that leaf is selected and arrow, and that'll make copies for me. Okay, so I've got 3 and 5. Now at this point, the trick is to fit them all on the page. So you can do that. These will all fit pretty well. And this is just using the basic edition. If you have business edition, there's a really slick tool called nesting. So I am going to select all these that I want to potentially rearrange. And I'm going to go down and find my nesting panel. So on the right hand side, if you have business edition, it's kind of these interlocked fingers kind of symbol icon. And so I'll click on that. And I want to use the cut area as my boundary. So I've got that checked. That just means that my letter size media is what I'm using as the boundary. And only shapes on media. Padding, I don't like it at 1, that's a little too tight for me. So I'll put padding at 5, and rotations I'll usually put about 4. And then if I click nest, that's going to put everything all nice and tight for me. In a lot of cases that will save paper. Or I could fit more leaves on there. You know, I could probably fit another couple oak leaves and have more ready for my project. So so you can manually nest your shapes, or you have with Business Edition can use that nesting tool. It's pretty slick. All right, so this is actually ready to cut. We're going to go ahead and cut this out of red cardstock. So we'll get that set up in the Send panel. So click on the Send panel, upper right hand corner. And my material settings. I will just tell you that with a sharp blade, cutting Michael's Recollections 65-pound cardstock, my personal preference is just to choose pattern paper medium 65-pound. So you can choose any paper that you want and manually input these settings, but this is my favorite setting for the Recollections cardstock. So if you're putting it in yourself, your blade depth is 3. Your force is 30, your speed is 5, you've got 1 pass. And then this little box over here, sometimes we'll use, that's the overcut, the line segment overcut. We don't need it in this case, so I'll just leave it empty. All right, let's do a little test cut. And I'm just gonna kind of click, I'm going to select these so I know I've got room in my upper left corner for a test cut. I've got room to move these down just to make sure I've got room. And so now I can fit a little test cut up in the corner. So let me stop the screen sharing. Okay, so we're going to use the red paper. It's kind of a reddish orange. And a new mat. So I know a lot of people that when they open up a brand new mat, they think it's too sticky. And I don't think it's too sticky. So my personal preference, and I cut a lot of paper, is to use a brand new mat without doing anything to de-tack it. So if you're pressing like a cloth on there or something, that will help it be less sticky, but you risk putting like fibers and things on there. You don't want your mat to be collecting fibers or hairs or anything that is collecting debris. That's what I call it. So I'm going to take off this cover sheet, a little protective cover, which will save and always use that later. And then remember, we had our paper set kind of a portrait orientation, so that's exactly how I'm going to set it on my mat, vertically. I've got the two arrows, one on the top, one on the bottom. It doesn't matter which direction you stick it into your machine. Just press it down, and then I'm going to feed it into the machine so it looks the same as how my virtual mat looked. All right, so I've already inserted my blade. I'm using the AutoBlade, but you can use whatever your favorite 1mm blade is. I've already checked my rollers. They're set up to the 12-inch width. I don't want it rolling on the sticky part, so I don't want it on the 12-inch vinyl width. I want it on the 12-inch mat width. I'm just going to line up the left edge of my mat with this little load guide mark. And then press the load button. And I always like to verify that it has fed in equally. You can see the front leading edge. You would just unload it if it ever goes crooked. Okay, so that is ready to go. My blade is in. If you're using a manual blade, at this point you would make sure that it is set to the same settings that you use, so blade on 3. I'm using the AutoBlade, so it will switch to a blade depth of 3 for me. You would set your own if you're doing manual. Okay, so I'm going to do a test cut. So I'm just going to click the little test button. Blade adjusts, then it does just a little square and a triangle. I'm going to unload that and just make sure that that cut cleanly, that I'm not getting any little snags or that feels like that's gripping, and that cut off cleanly. So those settings are going to work fine. Load the mat again. And now we will go ahead and just click send, and that's going to cut these leaves. So while that's cutting, do we have any questions that I can answer? Okay. So out of curiosity, how many people are, I'm curious how many people are used to doing paper crafts, or if this is kind of a new thing to do paper. I know that a lot of people buy the Silhouette machines only do something like vinyl or heat transfer. And so I like paper, but that doesn't mean everybody has to love paper as much as me. So it looks like I'm getting paper. Worried about getting the settings right. So your best bet with paper is just to do practice cuts and test cuts. I showed you that with a new blade, you could do just your pattern paper settings of blade depth of 3 and your force of 30 and your speed on 5. As your blade gets more dull as you use it, the first thing I will start to increase or change when it's not completely sharp anymore, or if I'm getting just tiny little tears at some of the corners, is I will turn on line segment overcut. So that little box with kind of the little triangle shape in your software, I will turn that on as my first thing when I notice my cuts aren't quite as clean. And then since I've got room on my force, I'll increase the force from 30 up to maybe 33 and max it out. And if those still aren't working, that's when I'll move up my blade depth to maybe a 4. And then you might not want to go straight from a blade depth of 3 and a force of 33 all the way to a blade depth of 4 and a force of 33. You might want to decrease your force a little bit. So those are some of the things that I will change. Another thing is just do a second pass if you feel like your cuts aren't totally clean. It's just to send it through either as a second pass, like I can check right now before I even take this off the mat that that's coming just fine. So I don't need to send it again, but I would just click send in my software one more time without unloading the mat. And that is usually enough, but it's an indicator that you might need to be increasing your settings a little bit. So hopefully that helps. This is done. So I'm going to unload that from the mat. Now this is cardstock, and so there's a couple ways you can take your materials off of a really sticky mat. So one way is to flip the mat over and try and have a clean surface. You don't want it collecting debris. And so I will just peel the mat away from the cardstock. And that works pretty good. If you need to get your scraper tool or your spatula tool and kind of stick that under there. Now, if you notice that your leaves are tearing, and I'll show this more with the lighter weight paper, it's helpful to find an angle where your leaves are kind of, you're not pulling where kind of the fingers of the leaves are getting a lot of stress on them. But this cardstock is fine. It's releasing really well. So what this does is your mat has plenty of flex to it. You can bend it. You don't want to crease it or crimp it, but you can bend it and curl it, and it's not going to hurt the mat. And then my paper is flat still, and I want it to be flat. Well, we will be shaping it. So in this project, even if your leaves get curled as you pull them up, it's totally fine. So I'm just pulling these off. And we have done, so now we've got one color cut. I am not going to go through every single color. We just don't have time for that. So I will tell you that with this setup that you just did with these 3 maple and 5 oak leaves, you can cut this out of the red cardstock, and then you can cut exactly the same thing in green cardstock. So I would just stick a green paper on my mat and load it into the machine and just click send again, and it'll cut it exactly the same. So one set of red and one set of green from the shapes that we set up. And then let me show you what I would do for the orange or the yellowish orange cardstock. See, I'll go back to my design page and I will move these off to the side. So you would leave this exactly the same, cut it in green, but once you're done with red and green, you can move them off to the side. So then my yellow cardstock, I want to do 4 of these tan maple leaves. So I'm going to hit hold Alt and click and drag this maple leaf, and I want 4 of them. So hold my Control or Command key and use my arrow keys, and that'll just make a copy of whatever you have selected. And then the yellow oak leaves, Alt, click and drag, Control or Command arrow, and now I've got the 4 and 2 that I need. So I'll just move these around and just manually nest them this time. If you want, it's okay to rotate the stuff. We're not working with a pattern here, so it's just a solid color and it doesn't matter what direction these are going. As you're rotating something, if you hold your Shift key, it will snap to like 90-degree angles, 90 and 45-degree angles. Okay, so those fit. Those fit. Yeah, I just want to make sure that I am not having anything go off the edge. And actually, I think if I just select all of this right now, and then I click on my quick access toolbar, there's this nice little tool that says center to page. So that's going to take everything I've selected and center it. And so that's really going to give me more space on either side. So I'm not bumping right into the edge. So that looks fine. And for this, I would cut this from the orangish yellow cardstock. I've already done that, so I'm not going to spend the time. I want to move on to the pattern paper. Okay, so I will move these. Just pretend that we went and we cut more. Move those off to the side. Okay, so for the thin pattern paper, the Recollections, I'm going to go back to my page setup panel. And that is, it's letter size paper. I mean, it's 12 by 12 paper. So leave the machine and mat the same, but the media size, I'm going to switch to 12 by 12. And let's see, I want 6 of the tan maple leaves. Another quick way to replicate your things is go over to the transform panel. And there's a replicate panel. Looks kind of like little overlapped ovals. And see, I can make a row of 3. And I can make just duplicate down. So there's some fun little quick tools for you there. I'm actually going to see about rotating these and see if they fit a little better. Yep, they do. I don't want any of this to go off the page. So you would just kind of nest these things together or use your nesting tool if you've got it. It's a nice, fast way to do things. And so 6 of those maple leaves and let's see, 5 or 6 of the red oak leaves. Oops. Alt, click and drag. And let's make a row of 4. And Control, make one more. That's good enough. Now I could make smaller ones and fill in that space and have more to fill in my wreath. Just whatever you want. I'm going to spread these out just a little bit. They're not quite so tight together. So if I select those and then come up to my quick access toolbar on the align options, I can space horizontally. So that'll give just a little more space between those leaves. And so this, let's cut it from the green Traveler pattern paper. Okay, so we'll go get ready to send that. So I'm going to my send panel, and this is going to be a different type of material. This one, I can just leave it right here because it won't save my changes. I'm just going to put my blade depth at 2, my force at 20, and I can either use the slider or just type it in there. My speed at 5, my pass at 1. And this time I am going to turn on the overcut. There's a lot of little tiny points, and so that's going to cut just slightly past those points. It adds a little bit of time, but it's kind of like if you're using, you know, an X-Acto knife or something where you just slice just a little beyond where you need, instead of having that blade try and turn that tight corner, it'll slice and lift up and go down again, and it's a little better for delicate corners. So turn on overcut. Okay, so these are my settings I use for the thin pattern paper, and it usually works pretty good, but we will do a test cut. So let me do the green paper. I'll just put it on my mat. Press it on well. Load it. Always make sure you're loading it with the edge of your mat against the loading guide so you don't block the way that the blade can adjust and how the rollers need to be able to grip the mat. I'm going to do a test cut. I'm not going to show you that again. I'm just going to click it myself. And you could hear, maybe you noticed, it was lifting up in between because it's doing that overcut. So let me see if I can. There we go. Yep, that looks like it cut well. So I'm going to go ahead and send that page. And do we have any questions at this point? Okay, so while that is cutting, I'm going to show you how to start shaping these leaves because we don't want to run out of time. Okay, so let me clear off these things I don't need. Okay, so what you need at this point is your scraper tool. So all of these leaves are basically going to be folded in half, and then we'll use the scraper tool to add just a little bit of curl shape to them. So just kind of use your fingers, fold it in half. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just make a crease, and it's not symmetrical, so it's not going to be exactly in half, but you know, close enough. And then with the scraper tool, you're just going to kind of drag from the center line with your thumb and drag out away from that center line. There's a lot of ways that you can shape paper, and this is the way I've just decided to make all of my leaves for this wreath. So I've got the one half that's kind of curled. There you can kind of see that half of it's flat and half of it's curled. And then I'll just kind of put my thumb where the crease is and do the same thing on the other side. So I'm just adding a little bit of curl out from the center line. And so then you've got this kind of this shaped oak leaf. And if you want, you know, if you don't like it curled down that far, you can then kind of flick out the ends with your scraper tool too. So that is how I shape all of the oak leaves. And then the maple leaves are same thing. You start by folding it in half. This one's a little more symmetrical, not exactly. Fold it in half. I don't want, it doesn't need to have a super tight crease, so I'm not gonna, you know, use a bone folder or my scraper tool on that. And then this one, again, just kind of curve it out, drag as you hold your thumb right on the crease. Just kind of curve that out by dragging the scraper tool against it. And then with this maple leaf in particular, you can either leave it like that, looks pretty good, or you can add another vein line here. So I would just fold from the very base to this tip and kind of fold it in half. Again, it doesn't have to be exact. Usually people aren't looking that closely at all the fine details of your coloring and shaping. So you can see that I've just folded from the base just to kind of create another vein line. And so I lost a little bit of the curl doing that. So again, hold my thumb in the crease area and just drag my scraper tool out from the crease. And then you can kind of just press to get more definition, or you can flatten it out. So that is how I shaped that maple leaf. So let's look at these. I don't see any tearing. Looks like that cut pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and unload that. All right, so with pattern paper, this is the thin stuff, and this is where you're most likely to get some tearing if you're using a really sticky mat. And so again, you can just see, I may need to have my glasses on for this so I can see where those cuts are. It's a little bit hard to see on the pattern paper. Okay, so as you crease, as you fold, curl your mat, you're going to see little bits of the design start to reveal itself, your cut edge. And so you can, at this point, just flip it over and pull just that one leaf off. And I recommend having the leaf kind of, so I don't want to be pulling it so it would tear in this direction at these creases. So I've started, so I'm pulling the base away first and kind of moving outward toward the little fingers. Let's see. I'm not sure you're going to be able to see this, but what I do a lot of times, instead of curling my whole mat, flipping my whole mat over, is I will drag it along my table edge. So if I drag along the edge, I can start to get that leaf to release. And that's usually what I'm doing with really sticky paper or sticky mat and delicate paper. So just kind of drag it along my table edge, and then I've got a lot of control, one individual leaf at a time. So let's see if I can do this quickly without tearing. Go as slow as you need to. Now, I realize that you will not all have time to do this with me. You will have access to the recording. On premium classes, only if you register will you get a link to rewatch the video. But in this case, since it's a premium preview, we went ahead and it's going to be available on the regular Michael's YouTube channel. Any questions? Comments? Questions not project related? I'm happy to answer Silhouette questions.
We do just have a lot of people that said they really like your tips, Kelly, so you have really great tips.
Good. Okay, so you can see this is pretty thin paper, and this is a brand new mat, and I'm having a lot of success with it, and this is what I wanted to show you. You don't have to make your mat less sticky. Now, a light tack mat would also be a really appropriate choice for this thin pattern paper, but your standard cutting mats are going to stay sticky a lot longer, so I usually use, I really don't use the standard or the light tack mat, but you absolutely could for this sticky paper. And once you've done like this whole wreath worth of all these sheets of paper, your mat will be really nice and primed for other projects. Just cutting paper gets it a little less sticky over time. And so let's see, I don't need my mat anymore, so I'm gonna clean that off later. Let me show you my other leaf shaping. Okay, so this is a slightly different oak leaf and it's thinner paper. Again, I'm just going to fold in half. It's exactly the same as before. Just don't tug too hard on the pattern paper. You don't want to rip it. Hold my thumb in the crease and just use my scraper tool to just kind of drag a curl shape into it, and a little flick at the end leaves if you want.
Kelly, we have a question.
Yes.
Somebody asked, which leaves do we use for the sand and goldenrod printed paper?
Yes. Okay. Thank you for bringing that up. That was the last thing I was going to show you. Okay. Now I have actually put this on my blog, findingtimetocreate.com. I put exactly which leaves and which colors you would use. For the goldenrod, you're going to cut exactly the same as we just did. I did the goldenrod and the green exactly the same. And then for the real sand, I used 5 or 6 of the orange maple and 5 or so of the oak leaf, the yellow oak leaves. So you would, same as before, do 5 or 6 of these orange maple and 5 or so of the oak leaves. Now, if you have extra room but not quite enough for a full leaf, you can just resize one of them smaller, and you have some extra small leaves that you can work with. Let me show you. This is kind of my finished page of the ones I did for both wreaths. So on that, and then it's slightly different for the Halloween one. I did 3 sheets of pattern paper, but I only did 2 of the cardstock. But I put on my website if you find this leaf wreath project on my blog, if you go down to the end, I actually say how many of each leaf. So the green traveler paper is 6 maple and 5 oak. And then I also was able to fit 1 smaller resized oak. The goldenrod is exactly the same as traveler. So 6 maple, 5 oak, and 1 mini oak. The real sand is 5 or 6 maple, 5 oak, and 1 or 2 mini oak. And really you could use the same, I would do both maple, and I would do a combination of maple leaves and oak leaves. But if you have one that you like better than the other, you really don't have to do 2 different types of maple leaves. It's all just kind of make it up as you go. The red cardstock, I did 3 maple and 5 oak. The green cardstock, I did 3 maple and 5 oak, which is the same as the red. The yellow, I did 4 maple and 2 oak. If you're doing the Halloween wreath, for the polka dot black, I did 5 maple, 5 oak, and 2 smaller oaks. Polka dot orange, I did 6 maple, 5 oak, and 1 mini oak. The striped black, I did 6 maple, 5 oak, and 1 mini oak. And then the black cardstock, 4 maple and 2 oak, and orange cardstock, 3 maple and 5 oak. And you don't have to do it exactly that way. And if you do want to do it exactly that way, you can just go to my blog, findingtimetocreate.com, and I've made that list for you. Okay, so this one right here, this is what I did of the real sand. Okay, so hopefully that answers that question. So we'll just get back to shaping. So your oak leaves are all just in half, and then this other little more lacy maple leaf, fold in half, and then curl. And you can be pretty gentle with this thinner pattern paper. And then I did on this, I didn't like how far it curled down, and so I did curl it up just a little bit at the ends. And I just find the scraper tool a really convenient way to do this. So let me finish shaping these that I just cut. Do we have any other questions or comments? Hey, well, if you guys think of something, let me know, because I've got a couple minutes of shaping here. Is anybody, I guess, does anybody at this point have any questions about if they wanted to do the Halloween wreath, what they would do differently? Like I said, we're using all the same leaf designs. And if you have other leaf shapes, you can cut some of those too. You may have extras left over, and that's fine. Make a little garland or something, or just pack them tighter into your wreath.
All right, somebody asked, do you resize the designs ever?
Yes, so I did resize the designs from how they originally opened. These ones, I made them all about 3.5 or 4 inches tall. And you could leave them bigger. You don't want them to be too big, because then they'll look a little weird on the wreath. I almost feel like these are a little small, but it'll be good. I resized these to about 3.5, and they probably could be better at about 4 inches. Yeah, so your leaf shape, a lot of times I will, when I'm putting together a paper craft, I have some older paper that's kind of just, I've collected over the years, and I'm not really going to use it anymore. It's either weird colors of patterns, or something that was trendy 5 years ago may not be trendy now. So a lot of times I will cut that older paper just to see what size it's going to be, because I know it's going to be a throwaway. And then once I'm sure I like the size, then I go ahead and cut my good paper that I want for that specific project. And if you wanted to mix some of these, the size, you could absolutely do that. I wouldn't go too far different from each other, but you could absolutely, especially to fit them on your page better, you can mix the sizes and resize whatever you want. A lot of my paper crafts, I will add some color with adding like ink to the edges, a stamping pad with a makeup sponge, and just add color. On this, because of these pattern papers that already had a kind of a texture look, a pattern to them, I did not feel like I needed to color anything. And so coloring edges is always an option, but you don't have to do it. I thought there was enough variety between these papers that they didn't need it. Okay, we're getting close. We can start gluing. Make sure if you're crafting along with me, make sure your hot glue gun is heated up. So this, it takes some time to do a project like this. This one's a little easier and quicker than some that I have been doing lately. I've been working on some Christmas projects that have taken a long time, so this wreath is really fun and relatively fast. Once you have your things cut out, that's a good time to, as you're shaping and gluing and that kind of thing, it's a good time to listen to podcasts or sit and watch TV, because it just doesn't take a lot of thinking. So I find it really relaxing, and I will usually multitask while I am shaping my cutouts. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Almost done. I did prepare most of them. I just wanted to be able to show you the whole cut and shape, at least of one of each leaf. So you don't have to sit and watch me do all of these. And if you watch the replay, I will not have my feelings hurt if you speed it up or skip 10 or 30 seconds at a time. That's the joy of online classes, right? You can watch it faster or skip ahead. Okay, so as soon as your leaves are all cut and shaped, now it's time to get out the embroidery hoop. And then I'll show you how just kind of my thought process as I do these. Okay, so now I've got ta-da! It's like magic. They're all cut and shaped. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I will actually just leave both rings of this embroidery hoop in place. And just because it's easy, I can just treat this as the top. But once your wreath is assembled, you can actually kind of rotate it however you want for its best angle. So this doesn't have to be the top. In fact, with my finished wreath, I ended up turning it, and if you look at the back side, that ended up down here. And so I just wrote with a pencil top, so I knew which way I had decided looked the prettiest. Okay, so when you're working with some bright colors, those are the ones I put on first. So I've got red, which is pretty bright, and so I'm just going to kind of, and I've got 3 of the maple, and so I'm just kind of going to evenly space those, because your eye is going to be drawn to that bright red color. And we can use these oak leaves kind of underneath, but I'm just going to use the maple leaves right now as kind of the bright red color. And then the other color that's really bright that's going to catch your eye is this bright yellowish orange. And so I'm going to kind of space those a little bit. Let's see, there's 4 of those and only 3 of the red. So I might just hang on to that for a minute. So the things that I've got the brightest that are going to draw your eye, I've got those evenly spaced out. And so then we're just going to kind of put these on. I don't want too much of yellow against yellow, so I will just kind of dry fit. Now you want these all to be kind of pointing the same direction, so the tip of each leaf is going to go in a circular motion all the way around, because we're doing a full hoop. And so they're all going to go pointing the same direction, but you can kind of fan them out. So as they lay against your wreath, let's see, that change that to that direction. You know, so you can have them kind of having the same center point at the base, but then kind of twist a little bit, rotate away from each other just a little bit. But you just want the leaves to be about the same direction. So really, we're just going to start placing these leaves, and they're just going to kind of balance there. Let's see, I've started, I think I've got mostly maple leaves that I did on this wreath anyways. So I'm just going to start with the maple leaves. And it doesn't have to be perfectly symmetrical. It doesn't have to follow an exact pattern. You just kind of do what looks good. And you don't want to cover the tip of any leaf. So you can tuck it behind, and as they come away from each other, you just don't want to cover the tip of any leaf. Let's see. Throw on some green ones. We're going to go a little fast here. You might want to take your time a little bit more as you plan this out with your dry leaves. Let's see, so if I've got kind of some green here, I'm just going to kind of evenly distribute these colors. Or you may want to do even a kind of a, I don't know, not a rainbow because we're not using rainbow colors, but you could have your colors kind of flow from green to yellow to red or something like that, and kind of cluster your colors if you wanted to. That's totally a look that would look pretty. So really the only thing when you have this done is you want it to be kind of visually balanced, and you want your structure to be hidden. So your embroidery hoop is what I mean, is what I'm calling the structure. So, you know, you don't want any of that wooden ring to be popping out and showing. So I'm just looking, I think this is the part that's a little bit intimidating to people, that it might not look exactly the same as mine. Don't worry about that. It is your own creation. Let's see, we'll channel Bob Ross and say, there are no mistakes, only birds. So don't try and get it perfect.
Kelly, we have a question.
Yeah.
Somebody asked, what is the approximate diameter of these wreaths once all the leaves are attached?
Let's see, I didn't bring my ruler, but I would say, since that's a 12-inch wreath and it's extending 2 or 3 inches on either side, it's probably 16 inches across, about, give or take a couple inches. That's about what mine is. So if you wanted to, well, you might not want to put it on a front door because then you expose it to the weather and it's paper. I've got mine hanging on my craft room door at home, which is a smaller door than my front door. So it can be smaller. If you're doing a front door, you might want to work with bigger wreaths, bigger sizes. Okay, so these are kind of starting to fall as I dry fit them. So since I've got started, it's okay to start gluing, and then I can tuck things in as I go. So basically, I'm just going to just hot glue the very base to the wooden ring. And this one, it doesn't really matter if you use a hot temperature or a low temperature glue gun. The high temperature glue gun will give you a little bit more working time, but it also has a higher chance of burning your fingers. So it's kind of personal preference whether you use high temperature or low temperature glue guns. Either will work for a project like this. And then I had talked about your colors, like spreading out your reds and your yellows on, just in case you're interested in making the Halloween wreath. Your orange is kind of the bright popping color, and that's kind of the one I would distribute. Just as a little tip. Okay. Yeah, so basically at this point, you're just gluing down. Make sure your tips are all exposed. Your tips never get tucked under another leaf. You can actually add leaves to the back side also. I don't know, we probably don't need to glue this entire thing down because I can use this as an example. So I've got my main leaves glued directly to the frame, and actually it's mostly maple leaves now that I look at it. There's a few oak leaves kind of tucked in here. And then on the back, you can see that where I felt it needed a little more depth and there wasn't room to glue on the front, I just glued them directly to the back of the frame. And that kind of adds a little more depth also. So there's, you know, some physical depth and not just visual depth. So yeah, I did add quite a few leaves to the back just to make sure that I could fit them on. On the red also, where I had a red maple leaf on front, and I said I wanted, you know, those kind of 3 red points to be my kind of the focal points and make sure those were distributed. I also tucked the red oak leaves below them so they were still clustered with the red, if that makes sense. And so yeah, once you start gluing on, get I don't know, half of it glued on, then start picking it up and just placing individual leaves where they look the best. For the sprays, for the little berries, so you can pretty much always find berry sprays at Michael's and various seasons. I loved these, and they just happened to go, I think I chose these after I'd already chosen my papers, and they just went really well with the wreath. So you're just gonna, I work with 3s a lot, and so I just took off, I just kind of divided this into 3, and you can use little wire cutters to snip those apart. And so the length I probably left about, so let's see, this one right here, this is 2 little arms of that sprig, and their base is glued together, just kind of tucked there. So I left some of the length, and since it's wire, you can kind of spread them out if you want. You really could add more too. I'm not sure I used everything. I liked clustering them in 3s instead of distributing the sprays all throughout. So that's a design choice, and you can do what you want. But really, if you're thinking triangles and you're thinking 3s, then you've got your red in a triangle, which is 3. You've got your berries in kind of a triangle, which is 3. And I didn't put them on top of the red because I wanted, you know, visual interest to just keep drawing your eye through. So I am not going to keep gluing that unless somebody has a question about how, you know, how I'm doing that. With the Halloween wreath, instead of berries, I use these little bats and stuck them in. They almost get a little lost they got kind of lost in the photograph where you couldn't really see the glitter in comparison to a black leaf. But when you're seeing it in person, they do stand out a little better. So yeah, again, I just worked with kind of threes. I used the 3 bats. These were really easy to use from Michaels, but I saw some really fun Halloween. If it's on wire, it makes it easy to bend and shape to fit your project. So let's see. Are there any other questions about this class, about the project? I do want to give you a little sneak peek of what I'm doing in, let's see, November. So November 23rd. Yeah.
Kelly, we do have one question. So somebody said, did you use glue or hot glue?
I use hot glue. Something like this, the hot glue is good for 2 reasons. One is that it's going to hold really fast, because if you're using tacky glue, you're going to have to kind of sit and wait as you glued dots might be okay, but a liquid glue I wouldn't use, because it would just take too long to dry and they would be sliding around as you're trying to move. So the hot glue is just faster. And then I also think hot glue is sturdier for most paper crafts, so it's going to hold up for a long time. So yeah, hot glue.
Awesome. And then somebody asked, are you gluing the entire center of the leaf or just the base of the leaf?
I am just gluing the base of the leaf. So I will just add a little dollop of glue right at that one base point and glue it onto the hoop. And let's see. And then, so imagine this is your hoop here. You can just attach it vertically, or you can kind of rotate as you go. So they're just kind of fanning out as you move along the hoop. So you don't want them, you want them, their tips pointing the same general direction, but you don't want them all lined up in a stiff, stark line. Just give a little rotation as you go. So next month, November 23rd, I believe, is my next premium class with Silhouette and Michaels. And this is what we're doing. We're putting vinyl onto a wooden cutting board. And then, since I'm still kind of in the mood for fall and florals, I'm also going to show you how to put on, these are just silk flowers from Michaels. So it's just a wooden cutting board. So you'll learn the skill of putting vinyl onto wood and my tips for that. And you can sign up for that class on michaels.com/classes. Just kind of go through there in date order and you can find mine. Okay, do we have any other questions? All right, well, I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope you had fun and learned some new things. And just, I'm grateful that you guys were here to join me, and we will maybe see you next time. Thanks, bye.